Welcome to this IoT Asia Plus conference. I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting this panel discussion today on leveraging IoT to create an enhanced in-store experience. It's all about connected retail, isn't it? My name's Anson Bailey. I'm your moderator for today's session. I'm the head of consumer and retail for Asia Pacific at KPMG. I'm delighted to be joined by three very distinguished gentlemen who will also be joining me on this journey to discuss connected retail. And they are Anurag Mukherjee, who is the head of technology at PT Matahara Department Stores in Indonesia. I'm also joined by Yang Kang, who is the regional director for Alibaba Cloud, looking at, of course, AI, big data for Ali Cloud, and based over in Singapore. And I'm also joined by another good friend of mine, Will Ross. And Will is the Chief Marketing and Distribution Officer for Dragon Capital, sitting over in Ho Chi Minh. So you've really got a flavor. I'm sitting here in Hong Kong. So we've got people from all around the region with you today. So again, thank you, gentlemen. I want to say a very big thank you for joining us. I have got lots of questions and I want to get your point of view. I really want to get your thoughts around connected retail today. And yes, we want to kind of talk about IoT. We want to talk about that in-store immersive experience, but we also want to talk about the broader topics of digital adoption. And I think it's fair to say that over the last couple of years, we've been dealing with COVID-19. One thing is for sure, and we have seen this acceleration of everything digitally. And in fact, if we look at a lot of the stats, we've also heard that there are over 80 million new consumers that have been added online around the region just last year. So this is something that we're going to continue to see growing. But as I mentioned, I've got lots of questions. And Anurag, I want to start with you, my friend, because I think we live in very interesting times. And I just wanted to get your views in terms of you're at Matahari. And how are you seeing the changes in those consumers in Indonesia? Are they now moving to this more digital online world? I mean, are we ahead of the curve or are we behind the curve?
I don't think in not only Indonesia, right? I think over across Asia, when I say when I say look at India, when I look at Singapore, the entire space out here, I don't think COVID would have accelerated the move to digital, but it was already there, right? Let's say if you start back with the likes of India, where Amazon and Flipkart and the likes were already there and been there almost a decade now. And out here in Indonesia, the likes of Tokopedia, Shopee, etc., they already pushed the customer to a digital era, right? But COVID, what COVID did for us out here is that for the traditional businesses, that kind of accelerated, that kind of moved into more digital. Obviously, at certain phase, right, when the first wave hit us, and mainly in retail, mainly for us also, there was this period of around a couple of months where there was nothing physical, right? It was just completely digital. And that's the only offering we were able to give to the customers. And that kind of changed the mindset. So what's happening now is, they are hooked into the ease of digital, but they still want the flavor of the physical as well. So it's more about how do we take it to that next level where through digital, you still give a physical feeling, while in physical, you still give a digital feeling, right? What we call as an omni-channel experience. That's kind of where we are heading towards.
Anurag, great point. Great point. I think you're right. I think COVID perhaps was the enabler, but it was already here. It was already happening. As you said, there are a lot of these new economy companies out there, whether it's a Gojek or a Tokopedia or other players across Indonesia that have really been pushing the boundaries. Yeah. And of course, a lot of those consumers now, they're expecting that omni that they're expecting that omni experience, aren't they? So I think that's a very, very good point that you made there, Anurag. And again, appreciate your points of view. I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but Can, I just want to get your views here, because you obviously, from a an alley cloud perspective, you're seeing a lot of very interesting developments. And I equally wanted to get your views, because we're seeing the rise of digital, we're seeing the rise of data. I would imagine that at Ali Cloud, you have got some really interesting data points. And perhaps you can also share with all of us and share with the audience about, what are those trends? What are you seeing, with the consumers?
Right, that's a great question. So just follow up on the previous question. I think COVID-19 has changed the customers' behavior or their expectation in retail like forever, right? So one example is that in our online to offline retail business, Freshable in China, in the last 2 years, we are experiencing 600% of business growth. That is because during COVID-19, people are just so used to the online purchase, and then the trend is not going to be back. People are going to continue having that behavior in the future. So then if all these behavior are digitized, then they're going to left with data or footprints in somewhere, no matter the touch points online or they visit offline store and then leave some data points at offline. And then the offline stores are equipped with more and more IoT devices and to interact with the customer to make the shopping experience more fun. So with that set of data, then there are two sets of trend we're seeing. The first one is understand better of the customer. So that means what customer is expecting, what is their preference in terms of their segments, in terms of the time frames. So how do we personalize the service so to the consumers? So in the future, there won't be like customer go and find the SKUs. It's gonna be the SKUs go and find the customers. So that's gonna be quite interesting. The second thing is that on the supply chain. So what we notice is that traditionally the SKUs has been like the same set of SKUs has been sold in the retail stores like for months or years. But right now the brands are inventing more and more type of SKUs. And then the question is that what is the best SKU to keep in the retail stores to better fill customers' needs according to customers' demand, and how much we should keep in the warehouses, in certain locations, in the stores, so that we can fast fulfill the customers' needs. So those two aspects are the trends we see can be solved by more data intelligence.
Great point, Can. And I really love that that question. Well, that point that you just made, that we now get to see and we're now able to understand the consumers more. As you said, as we see more of those IoT devices being connected in store, that's giving us a much better view on those customers. And equally, as you said, on the supply chain side as well, what are those SKUs? What are the best selling SKUs? What should be in the store or simply at the warehouse? So I agree with you. I think it's a really interesting time. And again, amazing numbers, right? You mentioned 600% growth over in across China, for example. The other interesting thing, of course, we were talking about the building up of those habits. And on average, if we want to talk about consumers and just talking about those habits being built, it usually takes around 6 months, right? 6 months to form a habit. We've now been dealing with COVID for over 2 years, so I think those new habits are here, and we're not going to go back, are we, to the old ways of doing things? So again, really good points, and thank you for sharing, Can. I'm going to come to you, Will. Again, I wanted to get your views, because you've been very much involved. In fact, you're a former Ali guy yourself, having been at Lazada. But what are the right digital strategies in the retail space? Because as I mentioned right at the beginning, we're seeing this really rapid migration of consumers online. 80 million new online consumers last year across ASEAN. What types of things are you paying attention to at Dragon Capital?
So I think there's two key points that Anurag and Yankan have already illuminated. So one is giving the customer the flexibility to choose a medium of how to transact. Do I want to buy online? Do I want to buy offline? And taking away any of the friction or the inconsistencies between the two. The second thing is empowering the consumer. You know, the risk for everyone as you digitalize is that your customer says, oh, you're doing that in your interest to cut costs. You're not doing it to empower me. So your customer wants to be informed. So one of the most interesting things I've seen, which is here in Vietnam, was during the pandemic, a electronics retailer, Mobile World Group, they applied a really interesting approach to addressing both of those points. Now, Mobile World is the largest retailer of electronics in Vietnam. They have a very large offline network, but they're actually also the largest online e-tailer in Vietnam. Their GMV is larger than Shopee, Lazada, which breaks my heart as a Lazadian, Sendo, and Tiki, the four key platforms combined. And why is that? Well, very smart thing. When their offline stores were closed during the pandemic, for that last mile, for that delivery of handsets, for other electronic devices, they enlisted their shop staff, which meant that when the physical good reached the consumer could have the conversation and the level of support and the level of insight that they would have had in the shop. There was no asymmetry, no difference between the ability of a customer to feel informed and empowered between online and offline because they innovated in delivery. And look, if you've been to Vietnam, you know everybody has a motorcycle here. So the ability to hack that solution of the last mile and to make that delivery not just simply a utility, but a source of value for the customer led them to having incredible performance during the pandemic. And why is that important is because for everything you do right in an e-commerce value chain, from driving traffic to merchandising SKUs to getting the conversion, the NPS, that net promoter score, is in the last mile. It's in that delivery. And the risk is not only in the attrition of the customer and the experience, but actually in the failed delivery itself. So an innovation like that is very smart because not only did it empower the consumer, not only did it help drive the sales, but it also minimized the attrition. And so these are the things where I think it's not about necessarily saying I'm purely online or purely offline. It's about actually saying that doesn't matter anymore. It's about how do I empower the customer to be as informed and as able to transact with as much ease, regardless of what mechanism works for them.
Will, again, some great insights. I mean, this is so good that we've got you and Anurag and Can on this panel. I absolutely love those key points. I think, as you said, customers now can choose, right? They can choose whether it's going to be offline or online. And as you said, it's also about empowering the consumer. That's very important. And the consumer needs to feel empowered, right? So we've got to make sure we have the tools. And equally, really interesting to hear that case study of Mobile World in Vietnam as well. And as you said, yeah, I mean, the innovation around that last mile delivery is also equally important because, again, we've got to meet the customer's experience, customers' expectations. We've really got to deliver on that customer experience as well. Thanks, Will. I just want to come back to Can because I again have got my questions here in front of me, so forgive me, I keep looking at my questions, but I was going to say that data, Can, you know, I want to talk about the role of data in business because there's so much data nowadays, and how can we better understand that consumer data, and how can we also better connect with those consumers, as Will rightly pointed out a little bit earlier on. We've got to drive that customer experience as well. But there's just so much data. So how can we manage that data?
Yeah, that's right. Data is crucial, and that is an essential thing or ingredient to run a successful business. And there is a saying we call all business is data and all data is business. So on the first point, all business is data. That nowadays when we talk about digitization, so when we build any kind of systems, applications, or use case of technology, then we need to think about what kind of data it generates. Traditionally, when we build an ERP, that is for the sake of completing a transaction. But nowadays, we need to think about what kind of data it can generate and then how can we use the data. So typically, for example, we have POS systems that records all the transactions, but that is the lower funnel when really customer is converted into a purchase. But how about upper funnel? So how do we know that what makes customers to come back? And then what makes customers to make a purchase? And then do we know the customer well? Or do we even have the contact with the customer themselves? So this is the data that we're looking for. And that is one of the key value driver to build digital applications. And then after that, all data is business. So once you have that data, then you can use the data to optimize your operations. So just now we were talking about the product is going to find the customer. That means we're going to provide personalized selections to the customers so that the customer can find out, hey, this is something that worth to explore, or this is something that I need, instead of they go and look for what they need. Another thing is that as a retailer, they have collaborations with the brands. So if the retailer have all the customers' data or their behaviors, that is the very big value to work with the brands, so that the brands will know what kind of advertisements or what kind of media they should use to advertising their SKUs, and then how to innovate their products to serve customer better.
If I may just add on to that, Khan, as well, right? So as you mentioned, knowing what the customer wants, right? And it's not about, so the challenge today for us as going omni-channel retailers, where we are across multiple channels, right? To get to the single view of a customer, right? Who is coming to our stores, who is coming to our online, but again, on online, he may come on the web, he may come on the app, he's shopping our products on a marketplace, we are corresponding with him, we're trying to get through him on WhatsApp, but how do we know that exact customer across these channels, his or her preference, how he has moved his preference, right? And then have that targeted, campaign to it. So that's the challenge going forward, I would say. It's not just about one channel, it's about, that entire ecosystem to be built across a customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anurag, that's a very, very good point, my friend. And in fact, that also made me think of a couple of things. And Ken, I agree with you. I think data, it's all businesses data these days. In fact, there's a few different sayings, right? That data today is like oxygen. We've all got to breathe it. And, if we want to have a very effective IoT connected devices for the future, we're also going to have to really ensure that we have all of the data points as well, as you talked about that upper funnel, and understanding what makes the customers come back. That's going to be really important. Anurag, I also wanted to kind of get your views as well, because what we very often hear is that retail, FMCG, those sectors tend to be quite slow. Perhaps they're behind the curve. They're not as responsive as financial services. Is that right? Is that a wrong assumption? Is retail behind the curve? And what kind of things are you doing at Matahari as well on that front?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, yeah, traditionally, if you look at it, yeah, retail may look a bit slow in regards to adopting to digital. But as I said, right, over the last decade, things have been changing, right? And that's across the geographies. And yeah, I think it's a push from every business now to be able to reach out to customers on any touch point, right? And as I said, right, when I say digital, it's not just about e-commerce, right? It's any touch point as a digital, even physical, right? So even looking beyond your traditional format, how further you can kind of get to the customers to say, okay, how can I be more near to you, right? What options can I give to you to be able to trade easier with me? So I think it's evolving across geography. For Matahari, we definitely have done quite a few things, right? So we had started our e-commerce journey around 2019, even before the pandemic. But over this last couple of years, we obviously say how can we reach further, right? So we looked into WhatsApp as a channel, and that's have really kicked off, right? So we are seeing, we call it shop and talk, and it's driving good amount of business at this point, and we are looking to further how to enhance that experience. Again, that bit around the physical and digital merging out there, right? Because in WhatsApp you're speaking to someone, while in pure play e-commerce you are not, right? So in pure play e-commerce is more virtual, but the channels like Line, WhatsApp, etc., you have that physical element also being embedded into it. And beyond that, right, going through the marketplaces, going through be able to like drop ship options, as well as in store, how can we further look at ensuring that what the customer is coming for, he is not disappointed, right? So in traditional retail terms, what we call an endless aisle model, right? So we are going towards this. So lots of activities across the board. And it's, as I always, it's not about technology always, it's also a merging, an amalgamation of technology, business process, and what the customer is looking towards, right? So that has to be built into one set of what we go for.
Yeah, Anurag, I think that's a really good point, as you said. And again, the key message there is whatever you do, don't disappoint the customer. Will, I just want to bring you in here as well, my friend, because of course, traditional retailers, they are changing. I have to say, though, that some of those traditional retailers, and some of them are my clients, they haven't changed fast enough. And they are getting left behind. Now at Dragon Capital, you're also looking at new economy. You're looking at a number of those new players. What can you share with us? What are you seeing in that space?
Well, look, I think just to pick up on one point that you made before about how retailers are not moving as quickly as financial services, I got to challenge that, because I think, look, we have
Go
four
ahead.
people on this panel. No, we have four people on this panel. Somebody, I'm in Saigon, you're in Hong Kong, Yang Khan's in Singapore, and Anurag's in Jakarta. And everybody who we have watching this platform, this presentation, and no matter where we are or who we are, the one thing we all have in common is that each of us at some point in our life has interacted with a retail bank and filled their heart with rage and been just so infuriated about the inability to be understood and what the hell are you doing with my money? And that's the most ironic thing about retail financial services, is that they are quite possibly the worst retailers that exist today. So I think there's an asymmetry there. Yes, there's some interesting things happening in fintech, but retail banks not necessarily actually taking point. Now, I think the challenge is, and this is where where our challenge is historically we have been an institutional asset manager. So a little bit of flex, right? We're the largest asset manager in Vietnam. We're the oldest. We predate the establishment of the stock exchange. And our business historically has been international funds into big investors like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. However, for any of you watching Vietnam, what you may have seen is that as a consequence of the pandemic and of the government support of the broader digitalization of the economy, we had the introduction of eKYC last year. And over the course of 2021, there were 1.6 million new retail brokerage accounts created in Vietnam, which was more than the 5 preceding years. At the same time, we had foreign investors selling off the Vietnamese markets, and yet the entry of the new retail investors took the market to new heights. So what that has meant for us is that for us, we needed to have a different strategy for how we accessed the domestic retail investor. Historically, we were a B2B2C model, like any FMCG player whose customers are the distributors, but whose consumers are the end client. For us, those distributors were banks, but those banks are friends and they can be foes for us as well. And so we've introduced our direct-to-consumer strategy, launched our app last year. And the challenge that we have is we're very much a down funnel product. Nobody wakes up one day and says, well, I'm going to invest in a fund today. It's not how the mind works. It's really about how we fundamentally merchandise our products differently, where we're showing them to be enablers of that higher truth, that upper funnel objective that Yang Kan was talking about, and fold it into that, but do it in a way that's authentic. Now, when you talk about the players that we see emerging, so us as an investor and what we see in the market, what we really do see is whether it's not necessarily the rise of the super app, but it's the rise of the super conversation. So whether it's on Facebook, right, which is pretty old world tech now, or whether it's on one of the messaging apps like Zello, which is our biggest one here, those conversations lead to a higher quality of customer that comes to us. The best quality leads that I have are the ones that come to me from a conversational channel where the product has already been considered and validated by a potential consumer's peers, online peers, right? And that's really key. Those facilitation points, like those, again, super communication players, are really where products are being illuminated, are where products are being validated, and where people are getting the support on how to use them. And we know that today, in this age of fake news and mistrust of institutional authority, that sense of identity a consumer has with his or her online peers in many ways is much more important than anything they hear from the brand about the product. And that's a big challenge for any retailer to get their head around. But that's where the opportunity is.
I love that point. And I think that's a brilliant quote. The rise of the super conversation, not the super app. Love it. Just moving around to both Can and Anurag, what cool things are you seeing out there in the marketplace? Because we've heard about automated stores, we've heard about VR and AR, we've heard about enhanced digital payments. What's making you, what do you feel excited about, Can?
I think I'm equally impressed about the quote that Will mentioned, super conversations. That is a fantastic saying. So the cool thing, what I see is actually around that idea. So if you see this couple of years, the live streaming is booming. So we were so impressed about how much sales a live streaming can drive. That is one of the example that super conversation, because there are someone who carries the product and proactively interact with you, so that you get better understanding of the SKUs, and if that and then have a judgment of if that match into your needs. So that is one type of super conversation, which is extremely cool. Another one is called a chat commerce. So I have been noticing that no matter it is WhatsApp or WeChat or Line, a lot of things are happening in chats. That is another type of conversation. It is a very interactive thing to understand what you need and then understand what is the product. And then it is not just through data analytics, because data analytics is sometimes quantitative, but chats is more quantitative. There is an emotion part of it, which make the thing even more cool. Right? And then when we come to offline, so offline, there used to be like product shelves, and then you carry a trolley and you take whatever SKUs and go and check out. But today there are many interesting devices. So for example, the digital signs, where you have the screens, and the screen can have for example, things like gamifications, and you can play with it. And that is another interaction. Or even smart trolley. So the trolley could even have a screen to interact with you. So all these are around super conversations to facilitate the conversations between the customers and products in both quantitative way and qualitative way.
Can, great point. And I love the point about the live streaming, because that really is another great example of a super conversation. And as you said, helping to get a much better understanding of those SKUs. And as you said, we're also starting to see other areas like gamification. That's also really becoming really quite mainstream now. Anurag, how about over in Indonesia? What are some of the cool things that you're seeing happening right now? Is it all about the live streaming or gamification or those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. Live streaming is really picking up out here. And it's about social commerce, right? As we call it. So be it through Insta, through, TikTok and live streaming on your site itself, right? So that's definitely picking up. And that's, I think, would be a trend at least the next couple of years. And obviously, this is an era of, the changing trends of so frequently happening. But live streaming is really, really a channel that we're looking towards. Beyond that, and both of you touched, right, gamification. So for us, gamification is more about that instant gratification, right? That you play, you get a voucher, you get points, you get whatever, right? And that you can immediately kind of redeem on any of the channels that you are trading with us. So that's again one big element of what I'm seeing out here. And the final one I would say is more about the payments, right? The variety of payment options that you can offer, right? So out here the e-wallets are really booming, right? Be it your your Grab, your Gojek, your Dana, and I would say around 20 odd different payment options, digital payment e-wallet options are running in Indonesia, and all of them, all of them are booming, right? So it's more about how more you can give, as well as how more you can link to the traditional banks also, right? Through your virtual accounts, through your QR code options, right? So if you look at Matahari to the right, we are kind of giving everything possible, and we are further building on it. So there is no limit around payment option that you can give to the customers, and the more you give, the better your chances of that final conversion, right? Because not everyone may be on everything. There is also not a loyalty as such on any of these e-wallets that the customers drive. It's more about who gives what benefits, right? So at a certain point, let's say I as a customer, I may be both on OVO as well as on Shopee Pay, right? Now let's say Matahari only give OVO, but then Shopee Pay is running a better deal. So what I'll do is I'll actually lose out Matahari customer because I'm not giving a Shopee Pay option. So you have to put again that entire ecosystem also around your payments, that give whatever option possible, let the customer choose.
Anurag, again, some great sharing there. Equally, as you said, I love that point about nowadays there is no limit what you can give on those payment options, right? It's unlimited. And again, it is quite amazing how we've seen everything digitize over the last couple of years. And as I said, we are seeing those new economy players evolve, and I think we're going to continue to see them evolve as well. Just very quickly, I know we're running out of time. I mean, obviously, lots of opportunities. I just want to get your thoughts on upskilling and reskilling, Ken, because we are going to need to have this new generation of workforce available. We need to have those digital skills, the data analytics skills. We're going to need, we're really going to need to see how we can, as I said, upskill, reskill. What's your point of view?
Right. So when we talk about all the technologies, actually, many of the technologies today is available somewhere. It has been practiced in somewhere. So and then when we talk about upskill and reskill a business, then we're talking about how to quickly adopt the technology in a larger scale way. And then apparently I'm from Alibaba Cloud, and then I have a lot of insights about how cloud has been speeding up this upskill and reskill according to for the new technologies. Basically, you don't have to really, many of the technologies are already there. It's just a matter about how do you implement, or how do you glue that into your current business to make it fly. So then the embracing cloud technologies, and then having some insights about what clouds can provide, that could be a great idea to upscale the technology adoption and then make all of the things that we discussed happening. And then another thing I want to mention is that just to follow up on the Anurag's point. So just now we were talking about the online behaviors and offline behaviors, that could be a disconnect. Yeah, that's a challenge. But however, when we talk about gamifications, that could be a fantastic ideas to connect the online behavior and offline behavior, because offline behavior challenges that you don't know who is who, because they are just transient customers until they present the member card, for example. But gamification is the fantastic bridge to bring the online to offline together. And then we should probably look into how to scale that to more audience so that we have the equal powerful data capabilities at offline compared to online.
Good point, Ken. Like it. Will, quick views there on the abilities, you know, as Ken already mentioned, a lot of this technology is already here, but again, how can we get it into more people's hands, and how we're going to upskill and reskill our current workforce?
So there's two elements to that, right? One is the technology and its application. The other is the adoption. And I think there's very different skill sets. Yes, as a general good, we should all learn how to think computationally today, right? Understanding how code is crafted, a good thing. And so if nothing else, a great way to think about how to solve problems. But it doesn't mean that everyone needs to be a coder, because the adoption is what drives the success. And the adoption is driven by the human-centric factors. And the adoption is driven by content, by storytelling, by empathy. And that's where there's an additional type of reskilling, especially in legacy corporates, of how to tell stories about themselves and about their products in a way that is going to resonate with a consumer, be authentic to a consumer, and activate them. And you can build all the tech you want, but if people don't adopt it, it doesn't matter, right? This is the thing we know. And this is where a lot of digital innovation actually just turns into be digital theater, is because way off somewhere in a boardroom, a decision is reached that, hey, here's a pain point for us to address digitally. It's implemented, consumers don't adopt it, and suddenly people conclude, oh, this digital stuff is nonsense. When in reality, they weren't communicating with the consumer. They weren't listening to the consumer. And if anything, going back to the notion of the conversation, if anything the technology gives us today is perpetual connectivity, which the debate, everything that Yang Kan was talking about in data, turning that into the insight of how to tell that story, to get consumers to embrace your product, to use the technology is key. And that is a very complementary but different skill set to the core coding. And that's really that storytelling. And again, it is storytelling. Will that companies need to bring in.
Absolutely. And again, you hit the nail on the head. I think we can have all the technology in the world, but equally, we have got to ensure that we show that empathy, that we have that storytelling ability. And also, we've got to be authentic with our consumers. They are demanding that. Anurag, we're running out of time. Just want to ask you, because of course, we see the rise of these young, of course, I've been talking about millennial consumers for a number of years, but now we're old now, right? We're old. Now we're dealing.
You and I
with
are old.
I
the
know.
Millennials are old in comparison.
But the interesting thing is the Gen Z consumers, and we know that in places like Indonesia, there's a lot of those Gen Z consumers. How are you dealing with all of those Gen Z consumers?
Yeah, for us, yet to hit us, I would say, right? So Matahari traditionally is more into, if you look at the crowd, or if the median section of a consumer, it's still the upper 20s, early 30s age range, right? But then we know that this crowd is going to hit us, right, in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's more about getting ready for that next 10 years, to changing our mindset, the change management within business, to see that, okay, now when in 2025 and going to 2030, when this crowd is coming demanding, and they are not loyal, right? It's the concept of loyalty is gone now. It's about who gives what, where I can get my best option at the best rate, right? I go there. That's the mindset of this new generation, right? So you have to be ready for that. And it's just not about, being Matahari or being anyone else. It's about, can I reach out to them to give them what they want?
Gentlemen, we are running out of time very quickly. Anurag, absolutely, that mindset change is required from all of us, especially when we need to deal with this future Gen Z consumers. I have a teenage son, and of course, he lives with his mobile phone 24/7. and he lives life vicariously through this digital world where gamification is so important. Before we go, one word, what should we all be thinking about? So Anurag, what's the one thing? Is it the metaverse? Is it connected devices? What's the one thing we want to share with people?
It should be know your customer. To me, that's the end game.
Know your customer. Will?
Relevance, being relevant to your customer.
Relevance, that's really important. Can?
Embrace the customer's expectation.
Press the customer's expectation. Gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure. I think the quote of the day has to go to you, Will, because it's all about the rise of the super conversation compared with the rise of the super app. Absolutely, technology is all around us, but we've also got to ensure that we have those conversations. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank Can over in Singapore, Will over in Ho Chi Minh, Anurag over in Jakarta. Have a great day. Really appreciate all of your great insights. And now I'm going to be back to the studio at IoT Asia Plus. Thank you.